On every continent, in nearly every nation, there is a silent network of structures. We are told they are fortresses, remnants of an age of cannon fire and conquest. They are defined by their shape, a star. A perfect, geometric form of immense scale and complexity. The official history is simple. Between the 16th and 18th centuries, the great powers of the world independently designed and constructed these hundreds of bastions. Competing empires, separated by vast oceans and primitive communication, all arriving at the same, mathematically perfect solution at the same time. This is the story we are told. But it is a story that breaks under the slightest pressure. A story that violates the fundamental laws of logistics, economics, and mathematics. We will not present a wild theory. We will present a calculation. We will demonstrate that the civilizations credited with building this global network of star forts could not have possibly done so. The resources required, the manpower, the sheer tonnage of earth that had to be moved, all without modern machinery, the numbers do not add up. The evidence of this is not buried in a secret archive. It is hiding in plain sight. These structures are not what we think they are. They are an inheritance. And the question of who we inherited them from is one of the most profound and unsettling questions we can ask about our own past. To understand the anomaly, we must first see it clearly. A star fort, or bastion fort, is not merely a wall in the shape of a star. It is a highly complex, three-dimensional system of defense. It is geometry weaponized. The pointed bastions at each corner were designed to provide interlocking fields of fire, eliminating any dead zones where attackers could hide from cannon fire. The low, thick, sloping walls, known as the glacis, were designed to deflect cannonballs, absorbing their energy rather than shattering. Beyond the main walls, you often find layers of outworks, ravelins, hornworks, crownworks. Each is a smaller, self-contained fortress designed to break up an attacking force before it could even reach the primary defenses. The entire structure is often surrounded by a deep, wide moat, itself another significant engineering feat. The precision is absolute. The angles must be perfect. A miscalculation of a single degree would create a blind spot, a fatal flaw in the design. Now, observe these designs. Look at the citadel of Lille in France. Then look at the Goryakaku in Hakodate, Japan. Then the Castillo de San Felipe de Barajas in Colombia. The architectural DNA is identical. The core principles, the specific angles, the ratio of wall height to thickness, the template is the same. How is this possible? The accepted explanation is diffusion. The idea, originating in Italy, simply spread around the world. But this explanation is insufficient. An idea spreading is one thing. A complex and unforgiving engineering blueprint being executed with flawless, identical precision across hostile cultures, different languages, different systems of measurement, and vast distances, is another entirely. This was not an evolution. In the historical record, the star fort does not slowly evolve from simpler castle designs. It appears, suddenly, in its fully realized and complex form. A quantum leap in military architecture. It is as if a complete technical manual was discovered and distributed to the entire world, all at once. But who wrote the manual? And how was it distributed to bitter enemies, who would never willingly share their most advanced military secrets? The visual evidence does not suggest independent invention. It suggests a single, unified source. A common blueprint, implemented on a global scale. The visual anomaly is unsettling. But the practical logistics are where the official story completely collapses. Let us consider what it would take to build one of these structures in the 17th century. We are not just talking about stone walls. Many of these forts are primarily enormous earthworks. Millions of tons of soil and clay, dug up and moved to create the sloping ramparts. Let's take a conservative example. A medium-sized star fort would require moving, let's say, 3 million cubic meters of earth. A strong man, working all day with a simple shovel and a wheelbarrow, might be able to move 2 to 3 cubic meters of earth. Let's be generous and say 3 cubic meters per day. To move 3 million cubic meters of earth would require 1 million man-days of labor. If you had 1,000 men working every single day, without breaks, without holidays, without sick days, it would take them nearly 3 years. And that is just for the digging and moving. It does not account for shaping the earthworks, compacting the soil, laying the stone foundations, or building the interior structures. It does not account for the quarrying and transportation of hundreds of thousands of tons of stone, often from miles away. Now, where did this army of 1,000 laborers come from? In many cases, these forts were built in colonial outposts with tiny populations. The entire population of St. Augustine, Florida, when the Castillo de San Marcos was supposedly built, was less than 2,000 people, including women and children. Who, then, provided the decades of labor required for its construction? The official story simply states that it was built. The logistics are ignored. The manpower problem is never addressed. Then there is the cost. The sheer economic output required to fund hundreds of these projects simultaneously is staggering. Empires of the 17th and 18th centuries were constantly at war, funding vast navies and field armies. These were already a tremendous drain on their economies. The construction of a single-star fort would be equivalent to funding a major military campaign, lasting for decades. To suggest they built hundreds of them is to suggest an economic reality that has no basis in the historical record. The technology is another contradiction. The surveying skills required to lay out these perfect geometric shapes over acres of uneven terrain are significant. It requires a deep understanding of trigonometry and advanced engineering principles. How did this knowledge become so standardized across the entire world, in an era before mass communication and standardized education? The story requires us to believe in a world of logistical and economic impossibilities. It asks us to accept that small, pre-industrial nations, with limited populations and immense financial pressures, could undertake the largest earth-moving projects in human history up to that point, and do so hundreds of times over, all across the globe, in perfect unison. It is not a matter of difficulty. It is a matter of impossibility. When we turn to the history books for answers, the silence is deafening. The records that should exist simply do not. For an undertaking of this magnitude, the largest public works projects of their era, we should expect to find mountains of documentation. We should find architectural plans, detailed budgets, supply chain manifests, and extensive worker payrolls. For other projects of the time, such as the building of cathedrals or naval fleets, these records often exist in meticulous detail. We know how many barrels of nails were used to build a single warship. We know the daily wages paid to the stonemasons of a cathedral. But for the star forts, the record is almost entirely blank. What we find instead are superficial attributions. A royal decree states, "A fort shall be built at this location." A plaque on the wall reads, "Constructed 1680 to 1720." These are not records of construction. They are claims of ownership. They establish a date of commissioning or a period of occupation and modification, but they offer no proof of creation from scratch. Where are the payrolls for the 50,000 men who would have been needed to build a major European fort in a reasonable timeframe? Where are the financial ledgers detailing the bankruptcy-level expenditure? They are missing, not just for one fort, but for nearly all of them. The explanations become repetitive, templated. The design is often attributed to a single, famous military engineer, most notably Sébastien Le Presteur de Vauban of France. He is credited with designing or perfecting dozens of forts. Yet, the same Vauban-style forts exist in places he never went, and were built before he was even born. The name Vauban becomes a convenient label, a historical shorthand used to explain away a global phenomenon that defies simple attribution. It is an explanation applied after the fact, a way to create a clean, linear narrative where none exists. When historians do address the construction, the language is vague. Words like rebuilt, reinforced, improved or modernized are used frequently. This language implicitly concedes that something was already there before the credited builders arrived. The official story is not a cohesive account supported by evidence. It is a collection of assumptions and attributions, held together by the simple fact that it has been repeated for centuries. But repetition does not make it true. The absence of evidence, in this case, is not neutral. For a project of this scale, the absence of records is evidence of a different story. It is the dog that didn't bark. The silence points to a fundamental flaw in the narrative we have been given. The true scale of the anomaly becomes clear when you view it from a global perspective. This is not a European phenomenon that was exported to the colonies. It is a global phenomenon that Europe participated in. Let us trace the pattern. We start in the Netherlands, with the perfectly preserved star towns of Naarden and Bourtange. They are masterpieces of geometric design. We cross the Alps to Italy, to Palmanova, a utopian city built within a flawless nine-pointed star. We travel to Portugal, to Almeida, another perfect star on the Spanish border. So far, this fits the European diffusion model. But then we leave Europe. We cross the Atlantic to St. Augustine, Florida, and find the Castillo de San Marcos. The same angles, the same bastions. We go south, to Cartagena, Colombia, and find another. Further still, to Brazil, to the Forte dos Reis Magos. The exact same architectural principles. Now we cross the Pacific. In Hakodate, Japan, we find Goryakaku, a massive and perfect five-pointed star fortress, attributed to the Tokugawa shogunate in the mid-19th century, a time when Japan was supposedly isolated from the West. Yet the design is a pure European-style bastion fort. We travel to India and find Fort St. George in Chennai. To Sri Lanka and find the star forts of Galle and Jaffna. To Indonesia and find Benteng van der Weyck. All over the world, the same design appears. These were not allies. The Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the British, the French, they were bitter rivals, locked in a centuries-long struggle for global dominance. The idea that they would not only share their most advanced military technology but also implement it with such uniform precision is ludicrous. Military innovation is the most closely guarded secret an empire possesses. You do not hand the blueprints for your best defense system to your worst enemy. The pattern defies this logic. It suggests the blueprint was not a secret to be shared or stolen. It was common knowledge, but not common knowledge of the 17th century. It points to a common inheritance. The distribution is also telling. They are almost always in strategically vital locations, natural harbors, river mouths, key mountain passes. It is as if a previous civilization mapped the entire planet and placed these structures at all the most important logistical and military choke points. The nations of the age of exploration did not build a global network. They discovered one, already waiting for them. Let us set aside the historical narrative and focus on the cold, hard logic of numbers. The argument against the official story is not based on speculation, but on calculation. We will use simple, conservative mathematics. Let's return to the sheer volume of material. Consider the Citadel of Lille in France, one of Vauban's most famous works. The earthworks and masonry represent millions of cubic meters of material. Let's focus only on the stone. A conservative estimate for the stone quarried, transported, and set in place for such a fortress is over 1 million tons. In the 17th century, transport was by horse-drawn cart. A large cart, on a good road, could carry perhaps 2 tons. That means 500,000 cart journeys were required, just for the stone. This does not account for the food for the workers, the water, the timber for scaffolding, the tools. The logistical train to support the construction would be larger than that of a major army on campaign. Now, let's consider the population. The population of France in the late 17th century was around 20 million. Let's assume a workforce of 30,000 men was dedicated to this single project for 20 years. This seems like a large number, but given the lack of machinery, it is not unrealistic for the pace of construction claimed. This group represents a significant portion of the available labor in the region, drawn away from farming, manufacturing, and military service. The economic and social impact would be immense. And Lille is just one fort. France built dozens. The Netherlands built dozens. Spain, Portugal, England, all built dozens, at home and abroad. When we add it all up, the numbers become absurd. We are talking about a sustained effort, over 2 centuries, that would have required a significant percentage of the entire population of Europe to be engaged in nothing but fort construction. There is no historical evidence of such a mobilization. No records of mass conscription for labor. No evidence of the famines that would have resulted from pulling so many farmers from their fields. The numbers presented by the physical reality of the forts do not align with the demographic and economic reality of the era. The equation is broken. There is a variable missing. Either the number of forts is wrong, which it is not. The time period is wrong. Or the identity of the builders is wrong. The physical evidence, the millions of tons of earth and stone, is undeniable. It is the story that is fragile. The numbers do not lie. And they tell us that the story we are told is a mathematical impossibility. We are faced with a conclusion that defies the historical narrative. The evidence demonstrates a global network of structures that could not have been built by their credited creators. So what is the alternative? We must construct a hypothesis that fits all the available data: the identical designs, the global distribution, the impossible logistics, and the missing records. We will not turn to fantasy. The explanation must be grounded, logical, and controlled. The most parsimonious hypothesis is this: the star forts are not creations of the 16th to 18th centuries. They are inherited structures. They were discovered, not built, by the colonial powers and kingdoms of that era. They are the ruins of a far older, globally integrated civilization. A civilization that possessed a level of engineering, logistical, and mathematical knowledge that we have misattributed to our more recent ancestors. Under this hypothesis, the facts suddenly align. The global uniformity of design is explained because they come from a single source. The impossible logistics of construction vanish because the heavy lifting was already done centuries or millennia before. The lack of detailed construction records is no longer a mystery. You do not keep records for a job you did not do. The construction records we do have, the royal decrees, the vague start and end dates, are recontextualized. They are not records of creation, but records of acquisition, repair, and commissioning. When the Dutch arrived in the East Indies, or the Spanish in the Americas, they found these structures already there, often ruined or partially buried, but still occupying the most strategic ground. They recognized their immense value, cleaned them out, reinforced the walls, added their own minor modifications, and claimed them as their own. The act of building the fort was an act of refurbishment. This explains why so many historical accounts use words like rebuilt or improved. This hypothesis also explains the placement. They exist at key geostrategic points because their original builders had a global perspective, an understanding of the planet's trade routes and military choke points that the later nations were only just beginning to acquire. This civilization is not in our history books. It is a ghost in the machine of our past. But the evidence of its existence is undeniable. It is written in earth and stone, on a scale that defies the capabilities of its supposed creators. We do not need to invent exotic technologies to explain them. We only need to accept that our historical timeline is incomplete. That we are not the first global civilization on this planet. We have examined the star forts not as historical artifacts, but as a dataset. We have seen the visual anomaly of their identical designs. We have calculated the practical impossibility of their construction. We have noted the consistent failure of the official story, marked by its missing records and vague explanations. We have traced the global pattern, a network that transcends hostile borders and vast oceans. The conclusion, derived from logic and simple mathematics, is that the story we have been told is incorrect. These structures are a legacy, a global infrastructure project left behind by a forgotten predecessor. This conclusion is not meant to provide a definitive answer about who these predecessors were. It is meant to demonstrate that the question is valid, and that the official explanation is not. The history of our world is not a finished text. It is an ongoing investigation. There are anomalies all around us, dismissed as curiosities, that may hold the key to a much deeper and more complex understanding of our past. The star forts are one such anomaly, perhaps the largest and most visible of them all. They are a silent challenge to our assumptions. They ask us to look again, to calculate, to question, and to consider the possibility that our civilization is not the first to rise to a global scale. The evidence is there for anyone to see. Look at the maps, study the designs, run the numbers yourself. The truth of the past is not determined by consensus or by tradition, but by the evidence that has survived to the present. If you believe in this method of inquiry, in using logic to question established narratives and to follow the evidence, no matter where it leads, then join us in this work. The archive is deep, and the patterns are waiting to be found.